I am Elena, 28 years old, and until 48 hours ago, I was just an invisible assistant librarian at the New York Public Library. I spent my days organizing dusty archives and my nights clipping coupons to support a husband who dreamed bigger than his wallet allowed. But everything changed in the blink of an eye, or rather, the screech of tires and the crushing of metal. The sterile smell of rubbing alcohol and the rhythmic, terrifying beep of the heart monitor were the first things that pulled me back to consciousness. My entire body felt like it was on fire, a dull, throbbing ache radiating from my abdomen where the steering wheel had crushed me. I tried to speak to ask for my husband, but my throat was parched, sandpaper dry. A nurse was standing by the foot of my bed, her face a mask of professional pity that terrified me more than the pain. I managed to croak out his name. Brad. Where is Brad? The nurse exchanged a look with the administrator standing next to her, a woman holding a clipboard that looked like a judgment sentence. Mrs. Davis, the administrator, said, her voice lacking any warmth. "We have been trying to reach your husband for 3 hours. The calls are going straight to voicemail." I felt a cold stone drop in my stomach. He had said he was just going to the bank to secure a loan for the surgery, that he would be right back. The administrator cleared her throat, tapping the clipboard. Furthermore, we attempted to run the credit card on file for the emergency procedure. It was declined. Your insurance has also been flagged as canceled due to non-payment. I am afraid we cannot keep you in this unit. We are preparing to transfer you to the county facility across town. Panic surged through me, overriding the pain. Transfer me, I was bleeding. I had just lost our baby. I needed stability, not a bumpy ambulance ride to an underfunded clinic. Please, I begged, tears stinging my eyes. Just try the card again. There must be a mistake. We have savings. My husband, he manages the finances. He would never let this happen. The administrator shook her head, already turning away. I am sorry, Mrs. Davis. Protocol is protocol. The orderlies moved to unlock the wheels of my bed. I was being discarded, thrown out like trash, because the man I loved had vanished when I needed him most. I closed my eyes, letting the humiliation wash over me, waiting for the jostle of the gurney. It never came. Instead, the heavy double doors of the ICU swung open with a commanding swoosh. The room suddenly went quiet. I opened my eyes to see a man standing there. He was in his 60s, impeccable, in a bespoke 3-piece charcoal suit that screamed old money. He held a cane with a silver handle, not for support, but as an accessory of authority. Behind him stood 2 men who looked less like hospital security and more like Secret Service agents. The administrator stepped forward, bristling. "Excuse me, this is a restricted area." The man did not even look at her. He walked straight to my bedside, his eyes scanning my face with an intensity that made me shiver. He reached into his pocket and produced a card. It was not plastic. It was metal, solid black titanium, an American Express Centurion. He held it out to the administrator, his voice low but cutting through the room like a scalpel. "Clear the floor. Get the chief of surgery down here immediately. And if you ever attempt to move her again, I will buy this hospital just to fire you." He turned to me, his stern expression softening into something profound, something like grief. He knelt beside my bed, ignoring the dirt on the floor, and took my trembling hand in his. "It is over, Miss Elena. The wandering is over. It is time to come home. My husband said he was going to get a loan, but he never came back. The hospital kicked me out when my card was declined. Suddenly a man in a suit paid for it all. He kissed my hand while he wept, and he said to me that it was time to come home. My husband chose money over my life. He did not know that his decision had just turned him into the enemy of the most powerful family in New York." Before I continue this story, hit that subscribe button if you have ever been underestimated by the people who were supposed to love you. I woke up hours later, but the noise of the general ward was gone. The air smelled of fresh lilies, not antiseptic. I blinked, disoriented, finding myself in a room that looked more like a suite at the Ritz-Carlton than a hospital. Mahogany paneling, silk drapes, and a view of the Manhattan skyline that was breathtaking. For a moment, I thought I had died. Then the pain returned, sharp and grounding. I was alive. I fumbled for my phone on the bedside table, a sleek marble surface that probably cost more than my entire apartment. There were 17 missed calls from debt collectors, but only 1 voicemail from Brad. My heart hammered against my ribs. Maybe he had been in an accident too. Maybe he lost his phone. I pressed play, desperate for an excuse that would make sense of his abandonment. His voice filled the quiet luxury of the room, but it was not the voice of a worried husband. It was the voice of a man irritated by an inconvenience. "Elena, look, I am sorry I did not come back. I was at the bank and, well, things are worse than I thought. The loan was denied. Keisha and I were talking, and she made me realize something. You are a financial black hole, Elena. The medical bills, the car repairs, it is too much. I have a shot at a big promotion, and I cannot have this debt dragging me down. I need a fresh start. Do not come back to the apartment. I will send your things to your sister's place if you have one. Goodbye." The message ended with a click. I sat there frozen. Keisha, my sister-in-law. The woman who had moved into our guest room 3 months ago because she was between successes. The woman who borrowed my clothes without asking and treated Brad like he was a king and me like the court jester. Brad had not just left me, he had looted me. I quickly opened my banking app, my fingers shaking so hard I mistyped my password twice. When the screen finally loaded, I gasped. Zero. The savings account, the one I had built up over 5 years of skipping lunches and working overtime, was empty. The emergency fund, $40,000 meant for a down payment on a house, was gone. Withdrawal time-stamped 2 hours before my accident. He had taken the money. He had taken the money and left me to die. A knock on the door interrupted my spiraling panic. It was the man in the suit from earlier. He entered with a tray of tea, moving with the silent grace of someone who had spent a lifetime in service to the elite. He placed the tray down and poured a cup, the china rattling softly. I pulled the sheets up to my chin, defensive. "Who are you? Why did you pay for this? I cannot pay you back. My husband took everything." The man paused, holding the teapot. "I am Silas. I am the executor of the Sterling Family Trust. And you, my dear, do not need to pay for anything. You own the building we are standing in." I stared at him. The drugs must still be in my system. Sterling, as in Sterling Holdings, the real estate and medical conglomerate that owned half of Manhattan, the company Brad had applied to 5 times and been rejected from 5 times. "That is impossible," I whispered. "My parents were high school teachers in Ohio. They died in a fire when I was 10. I grew up in foster care." Silas reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thick leather folder. He placed it gently on my lap. "Your parents were indeed teachers, but your mother was not born a teacher. She was born Isabella Sterling, the only daughter of Archibald Sterling. She ran away at 19 to marry a man her father deemed unsuitable. She chose love over legacy, and for that she was erased from the family records." I opened the folder. There were photos. Old grainy photos of a woman who looked exactly like me, standing on the steps of a mansion I had seen in magazines, holding the hand of a man who looked like my father. And then a DNA test report, stamped with the official seal of the most reputable lab in the country. Probability of relation to Archibald Sterling, 99.9%. Silas continued, his voice steady. "Your grandfather passed away 3 days ago. He spent the last decade searching for you. He regretted his stubbornness every day. In his will, he bypassed all distant cousins and board members. He left everything to his direct bloodline. You, Elena, are the sole heiress to the Sterling fortune. $40 billion in assets, including the hospital that tried to evict you. $40 billion. The number was too big to comprehend. It felt abstract, ridiculous. Yesterday, I was crying over a $10 increase in our electric bill. Today, I owned the electric company. But as the shock subsided, a colder, sharper emotion took its place. Rage. I looked at the phone in my hand, the screen still displaying the end of Brad's voicemail. He called me a burden. He stole my $40,000, thinking it was a fortune while I was sitting on an empire. He left me to bleed out because he thought I had no value. I looked up at Silas. Does anyone else know? Silas shook his head. The will is sealed. The board suspects there is an heir, but they do not know who. To the world, You are still Elena Davis, the librarian." I swung my legs over the edge of the bed. My abdomen screamed in protest, but I gritted my teeth. "Good. Keep it that way." Silas raised an eyebrow, a flicker of surprise breaking his professional mask. "Madam, you are injured. You should rest. We can transfer you to the Sterling estate in the Hamptons. You never have to see that man again." "No," I said, standing up. The pain was grounding now. It fueled me. If I vanish to the Hamptons, he wins. He gets to keep my money, live in my apartment, and rewrite the story. He thinks I am weak. He thinks I am trash. I want to see his face when he realizes he threw away a diamond to pick up a stone. I want to go back to the apartment. Silas studied me for a long moment, assessing me not as a lost girl, but as a Sterling. A slow, respectful smile touched his lips. "Very well. But you will not go alone. I will remain in the shadows, but I will be watching. And, madam," he handed me a black card identical to the one he had used. "Use this. The limit does not exist." I took a cab back to the apartment complex in Queens. It was a walk-up, the kind of building where the hallway always smelled of boiled cabbage, and the elevator was broken more often than it worked. I stood outside door 4B, my hand hovering over the key. I could hear music inside, loud thumping bass, laughter. It sounded like a celebration. I turned the key and pushed the door open. The smell hit me first. Cheap pepperoni pizza and stale beer. The apartment was a wreck. Streamers were hung haphazardly across the living room. My favorite vase, the one I had bought at a thrift store and hand-painted, was smashed on the floor. Brad was sitting on the sofa, a beer in hand, his arm draped around Keisha. His mother and brother were there too, raiding the fridge. They all froze when they saw me. I stood in the doorway, still wearing my hospital clothes, pale and trembling, but upright. Brad was the first to react. He did not look relieved. He looked annoyed. "Elena, I told you not to come back here. I meant what I said on the voicemail." "We are done." Keisha stood up, smacking her gum. She was wearing a tight neon pink dress that clashed violently with the room. But my eyes were drawn to her neck. There, resting against her skin, was a delicate silver locket. My mother's locket. The only thing I had left of her. The one thing I kept in a velvet box in the back of my underwear drawer, hidden away. "That is mine," I said, my voice barely a whisper. Keisha touched the locket, feigning ignorance. "This old thing. Brad gave it to me. Said it was just some junk you had lying around. It looks better on me anyway, do not you think? It actually shines now that it is not on a loser." Brad laughed, a cruel braying sound. "Come on, Elena. Do not make a scene. You are lucky I am letting you stand there. I paid the rent this month, so technically this is my place. You want your junk back? Take it and get out." My mother-in-law chimed in from the kitchen, her mouth full of pizza. "Yeah, Elena, Brad is going places now. He is going to be a big shot at Sterling Holdings. He needs a woman who can keep up, not a mouse. Keisha here knows people. She is going to introduce him to the right crowd. You were always just dead weight." I looked at them. Really looked at them. For 5 years, I had cooked their meals, cleaned their messes, loaned them money I never got back, and apologized for existing. I saw Brad bloated with unearned arrogance, spending my life savings on cheap beer and a party to celebrate my abandonment. I saw Keisha, a vulture in polyester, picking the bones of my life before I was even cold. I felt that eerie calm settle over me again, the same feeling I had when Silas told me who I really was. They thought they were breaking me. They had no idea they were forging me. I walked over to the closet, ignoring Keisha, who stepped in my path trying to intimidate me with her size. I grabbed a duffel bag and started throwing clothes into it. Not everything, just the essentials. I needed to play the part. I needed them to believe I was defeated. "You are leaving." "Good," Brad sneered. "Leave the keys on the counter. And do not think about asking for alimony. My lawyer is a shark." I zipped up the bag. I turned to look at him one last time. His lawyer was probably a guy he met at a dive bar. My lawyer was Silas, a man who could dismantle this entire block with a phone call. I looked at Keisha, her fingers curling possessively around my mother's locket. "Enjoy it, Keisha," I said softly. "It is a family heirloom. It carries a lot of energy. I hope you are ready for the weight of it." Keisha rolled her eyes. "Whatever, weirdo. Bye." I walked out of the apartment, the sound of their laughter chasing me down the hall. They were toasting to their future, to Brad's imaginary job at Sterling Holdings, to the money they stole. I walked out into the cool night air of Queens. A black town car was idling at the curb, blending into the shadows. The rear window rolled down an inch, revealing Silas's face. "Where to, madam?" I opened the door and slid into the leather interior, the scent of expensive cologne erasing the smell of cheap pizza. "Take me to the Pierre Hotel," I said. "And Silas, freeze his assets. Not yet. Let him have his night. But tomorrow, I want to buy the mortgage on that building. And I want a full report on every single debt Brad has ever accrued." Silas nodded. "It shall be done." I leaned back, watching the lights of the city blur past. I touched my neck where the locket should have been. Keisha could wear the silver. I wore the crown. The game had just begun, and they did not even know they were playing. They thought they had kicked a stray dog out into the street. They were about to find out they had just let a wolf into the fold. The first night back in the apartment was the longest of my life. My body was still screaming from the trauma of the accident and the surgery, every movement sending a sharp jolt of pain through my abdomen. I stood in the hallway, clutching the duffel bag I had packed at the hospital, staring at the closed door of the master bedroom. My bedroom. The room I had painted a soft sage green to calm my anxiety. The room where I had cried myself to sleep countless nights worrying about how to pay Brad's credit card bills. I reached for the handle, assuming I could finally lie down on my own mattress, but the door was locked. From inside, I heard the muffled sound of the television and heavy footsteps. Confused, I knocked. The door swung open, but it was not Brad. It was Keisha. She was wearing my silk robe, the one Brad had given me for our second anniversary, or rather the one I had bought for myself and pretended was from him so I would not feel so pathetic. It was too tight on her, straining at the seams, but she wore it with an air of absolute ownership. "Excuse me," I said, my voice raspy. "I need to lie down. I need my bed." Keisha did not move. She leaned against the doorframe, picking her teeth with a long acrylic nail. "Oh, honey, you did not hear. Brad said you are taking the couch." I blinked, sure I had misheard. "The couch? I just had a C-section and internal reconstruction surgery. I cannot sleep on a lumpy sofa." "Where is Brad?" Brad appeared behind her, shirtless, holding a toothbrush. He looked annoyed to be interrupted. "Elena, stop the drama. Keisha and Marcus are staying in here for a while. The guest room is full of my mother's boxes, and the air mattress has a leak. Besides, Keisha is used to a king bed. She needs her rest. She is helping me network with high-level investors tomorrow. You are just recovering. You can do that anywhere." I stared at him. He was relegating his injured wife to the living room so his brother's wife could sleep in luxury because she was supposedly helping his career. The absurdity of it almost made me laugh. I looked at Keisha, who smirked, adjusting the lapel of my robe. "It is just business," Elena Brad said, brushing past me to go to the kitchen. "Do not be selfish. You are lucky to even be back here. Who paid that hospital bill anyway? Some rich uncle you never told me about." I followed him to the kitchen, moving slowly, clutching my side. "It was a charity," I lied smoothly. "The Good Samaritan Fund for Indigent Women. They cover cases where the family abandons the patient." Brad snorted, opening the fridge. "Of course. Charity. That figures. Well, at least it did not cost me anything." "Just try to stay out of the way, okay? I have a lot of pressure on me right now." That night I lay on the beige sofa we had bought at a discount outlet 5 years ago. A metal spring dug into my lower back, exactly where my kidneys were. The living room smelled of stale pizza and the lingering scent of Keisha's overpowering perfume. I could hear them laughing in the bedroom. My bedroom. I pulled the thin throw blanket up to my chin and stared at the ceiling fan wobbling overhead. I could have called Silas. I could have had a limousine here in 10 minutes to whisk me away to the penthouse at the Four Seasons. I could have slept on Egyptian cotton sheets and had a private chef make me breakfast. But I stayed. I needed to see this. I needed to etch every single moment of disrespect into my memory so that when I finally crushed them, I would not feel a single ounce of mercy. I reached for my phone and opened the secret app Silas had installed for me. It was a direct line to the Sterling Private Investigation Unit. Entry 1, I typed. Brad evicted me from the master bedroom. Keisha is wearing my clothes. They believe I am living on charity. For the next 3 days, my life became a study in modern Cinderella servitude minus the fairy godmother because I had become my own. The physical pain of recovery was constant, but the emotional assault was worse. Keisha and my mother-in-law, Linda, treated the apartment like a hotel, and me like the invisible maid. On Tuesday morning, I was in the kitchen trying to make toast. Moving was agony. I had to hold the counter for support. Linda walked in, bypassing me completely, to open the cupboard. "We are out of coffee," she announced, slamming the cabinet door. "Elena, you need to go to the store and get the good kind, not that generic trash you usually buy. Keisha likes the organic French roast." I turned to her. "Linda, I cannot lift anything heavier than 5 pounds. The doctor said, bed rest." Linda rolled her eyes. "Oh, stop milking it. You did not lose a limb. You just lost a... Well, you know, it happens. You are young. Besides, since you are not working and not contributing a dime to this household, the least you can do is run errands. Brad is working himself to the bone to keep a roof over your head." The injustice burned in my throat like bile. Brad was not working. Brad was currently asleep at 10 in the morning because he had stayed up all night playing video games with his brother. The roof over our heads was being paid for by the trust fund I now controlled, though they did not know it yet. Silas had quietly purchased the building yesterday. Technically, Linda was yelling at her landlord. "I will go," I said quietly. I grabbed my purse. I walked to the corner store, every step a reminder of my surgery. But I used the walk to make a call. "Silas." "Yes, madam. How are you holding up?" "I am fine. I need you to expedite the purchase of the debt on Brad's car. And I want full surveillance on his meetings this week. Who is he actually meeting?" "He has a lunch scheduled today at Le Bernardin," Silas replied, "with a Miss Vanessa Thorne." I stopped walking. A smile tugged at the corner of my lips. Vanessa Thorne, the 24-year-old vice president of marketing at Sterling Holdings. A brilliant girl I had hired myself 3 years ago when I was secretly evaluating talent for the board. She was sharp, ambitious, and fiercely loyal to the Sterling family. "He thinks he is networking," I said. "He thinks he is dating Silas," corrected gently. "Our surveillance indicates he has told his friends he is going to, quote, lock down the heiress, unquote. He believes Vanessa is the key to the Sterling kingdom." "Let him believe it," I said. "Tell Vanessa to play along. Tell her I want him to feel like a king. I want him to think he has won the lottery." "Understood, madam. And madam, please do not carry heavy groceries. I have arranged for a delivery to be left at your door in 5 minutes. Just pretend you bought them. Thank you, Silas." When I got back, I kicked the bags inside. Keisha was on the sofa, my sleeping spot, painting her toenails. She did not look up. "Took you long enough," she muttered. "Did you get the almond milk? Dairy makes me bloat." "It is in the bag," I said, walking past her to the kitchen. That evening was the breaking point. Brad had invited his boys over for a game night to celebrate his upcoming promotion. The apartment was filled with smoke and the noise of 6 men yelling at the TV. I was in the kitchen washing the dishes they kept piling up. Beer bottles, salsa bowls, greasy plates. "Hey, Elena," Brad shouted from the living room. "We need more ice." I wiped my hands on a rag and opened the freezer. Empty. I sighed and started cracking ice from the trays, my back aching. I carried the bucket out to the living room. Keisha was sitting on the arm of Brad's chair, giggling at everything he said. She looked at me with disdain as I set the ice down. "You look terrible, Elena," she said loudly, making the room go quiet. "You are wearing those sweatpants again." No wonder Brad is always looking for an upgrade. A man needs a woman who represents his status. The men laughed uncomfortably. Brad did not defend me. He leaned back, taking a swig of beer. "Speaking of upgrades," Brad said, puffing out his chest, "you guys will not believe who I had lunch with today." "Vanessa Thorne." The room erupted in whistles. The Sterling girl, one of his friends, asked. "No way, man. She is out of your league." Brad smirked, glancing at me to make sure I was listening. "Not for long. We really connected." She laughed at all my jokes. She even touched my hand when I reached for the check. "I am telling you, boys, she is into me. She sees my potential. Unlike some people." He cast a darker look in my direction. "She is the daughter of one of the main partners," Brad continued, lying through his teeth. Vanessa wasn't a partner's daughter. She was a self-made executive, but Brad never let facts get in the way of a good story. I'm thinking of asking her to the company gala next week. Once I seal that deal, I am set for life. Corner office, 6 figures, company car. And what about Elena? The friend asked, lowering his voice slightly, but not enough. Brad shrugged as if discussing an old car he was trading in. Look, Elena is a good girl, but she is limited. She is happy clipping coupons and working at the library. I need someone who understands power, someone who can stand next to me at the top. Vanessa is that girl. Once the ink is dry on my contract, I am going to cut the dead weight. Dead weight. I stood there holding a tray of empty bottles. He was planning to discard me like a used napkin the moment he secured a job at my company. He was bragging about seducing my employee. Keisha chimed in, leaning her head on Brad's shoulder. And I will be there to help you decorate the new penthouse, right, Brad? We have such similar taste. Elena here thinks beige is a personality. I felt a sudden intense urge to drop the tray, to scream that I owned the building, to tell him that Vanessa was texting me right now, sending me screenshots of his pathetic pickup lines, to tell Keisha that the designer bag she was flaunting was a knockoff I could spot from across the room. But I didn't. I channeled the eerily calm energy of my grandfather Archibald Sterling. I placed the tray down gently on the coffee table. I hope she makes you happy, Brad, I said. My voice was steady, devoid of tears. The room went silent again. Oh, she will, Brad sneered. She definitely will. Now can you make some nachos? The guys are hungry. I looked at him, at his smug, flushed face, at Keisha's triumphant grin, at Linda, who was nodding in agreement from the recliner. Sure, I said. I will make the best nachos you have ever had. I went back to the kitchen. I did not make nachos. I took out my phone and sent a text to Silas. Phase 1 is complete. I have seen enough. Proceed with the eviction notice for the apartment and tell Vanessa to invite him to the gala. I want him there. I want him front and center when the world finds out who I really am. I leaned against the counter, listening to them toast to Brad's future. They were celebrating a mirage. I closed my eyes and breathed in deeply. The air in the kitchen was stale, but in my mind, I could already smell the crisp, expensive air of the boardroom. Enjoy the nachos, Brad, I whispered to the empty kitchen. They will be the last meal you enjoy in peace. Friday arrived with a demand, not an invitation. I was in the living room carefully folding the laundry that Linda had left in a heap when Brad stormed in. He tossed a garment bag at me. It landed on the sofa right next to my healing incision. Put something decent on, he said, adjusting his cufflinks in the hallway mirror. Tonight is the Real Estate Association Gala. I need you there. I looked at the bag. Why, I asked, keeping my voice neutral. You made it very clear that I am an embarrassment to your new image. You have Keisha for the arm candy role. Brad smirked, admiring his own reflection. Keisha is coming, obviously. She is there to help me socialize. She has energy. You are coming because I need someone to handle the logistics. Holding coats, grabbing drinks, making sure I do not get stuck talking to losers. Basically, try to look invisible and make yourself useful for once. Consider it rent payment for the sofa. The audacity was breathtaking. He wanted his wife, the woman recovering from major surgery, to act as his personal assistant while he paraded his mistress around. I could have refused. I could have told him to hire a jagged rock to carry his coat. But I nodded. I wanted to see this. The gala was sponsored by Sterling Holdings. It was my party. He just did not know it yet. I went to the closet and pulled out the only formal dress I had left that fit my current swollen frame. It was a simple black long-sleeved midi dress. It was vintage, passed down from a thrift store bin, but the cut was timeless. It was modest, fading into the background, exactly what Brad wanted. When I walked out, Keisha was already waiting by the door. She looked like a disco ball that had exploded. She was wearing a floor-length sequined gown in a jarring shade of electric blue. It was tight, revealing, and clearly a rental. The tag was still tucked visibly under her armpit. She looked me up and down and let out a sharp, cackling laugh. Oh my God! Brad, look at her, Keisha squealed. She looks like she is going to a funeral, or like one of the waitstaff. Are you sure they will even let her in? Brad glanced at me with disdain. It is fine. She blends in. That is the point. Just do not stand too close to us in the photos, Elena. I do not want to ruin the aesthetic. We took a cab to the venue. Brad and Keisha sat in the back, whispering and giggling, while I sat in the front with the driver. When we arrived at the grand ballroom of the Pierre Hotel, the air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and ambition. I stepped out, wincing slightly as my heels hit the pavement. Brad immediately shoved his heavy wool coat into my arms. "Here, hold this," he said, "and take Keisha's wrap. The coat check line is too long and I need to get inside before the open bar gets crowded." I stood there on the sidewalk, loaded down with their outerwear like a pack mule. Keisha tossed her faux fur stole on top of the pile, smirking. "Do not drop it, Elena. That is imported." I followed them inside, walking 5 paces behind. The ballroom was magnificent. Crystal chandeliers the size of small cars hung from the ceiling. A string quartet was playing soft classical music in the corner. But what caught my eye were the banners. Huge silk banners draped behind the stage, emblazoned with the gold crest of Sterling Holdings. It was my grandfather's crest. My crest. Brad stopped in the middle of the room, scanning the crowd like a predator looking for weak prey. He spotted a group of men near the bar and puffed out his chest. "Okay, listen to me," he lectured, turning to me but looking over my shoulder. "This is how the big game is played, Elena. See those guys? That is the inner circle. You have to project power. You have to dominate the space. You would not understand, obviously. You think money is just about saving coupons. Real money is about leverage. It is about debt." He was pointing at a group of mid-level brokers who were known in the industry for inflating their numbers. He thought they were the kings. He completely missed the quiet man standing near the pillar, the CFO of the largest bank in New York, sipping water. I tightened my grip on his coat. "Is that so?" I asked softly. "I thought real money was about asset liquidity and long-term equity." Brad laughed, a loud barking sound that drew stares. "God, you are cute when you try to sound smart. Stick to organizing books, babe. Leave the finance to the men. Equity. You do not even know what that word means." Just then the crowd parted. Walking toward us was Vanessa Thorne. She looked stunning in a tailored cream suit that screamed competence and class. Unlike Keisha's glittery costume, Vanessa's outfit commanded respect without shouting. She held a champagne flute and moved with purpose. Brad's face transformed. He practically vibrated with excitement. He smoothed his hair and stepped forward, blocking me from view. "Vanessa," he called out, his voice dropping an octave to sound smoother. "So glad you could make it. I was just telling my associates here about the merger rumors." Vanessa stopped. Her eyes flicked briefly to me, standing behind him, buried under a pile of coats. I gave her the tiniest, almost imperceptible nod. Her expression did not waver, but I saw the flash of recognition in her eyes. She turned her dazzling smile onto Brad. "Brad," she said, extending a hand, "I did not expect to see you here. And who are your friends?" Brad grabbed Keisha's hand and pulled her forward. "This is Keisha. She is a consultant, a very close partner of mine." And that he gestured vaguely behind him with his thumb is Elena. She is just handling the logistics for us tonight. Vanessa looked at me. "Hello, Elena," she said, her voice warm. "Can I get you a drink? You look like you have your hands full." Brad cut in immediately. "Oh, she is fine. She does not drink. Keeps her sharp for the coat check duty, right? Anyway, Vanessa, I wanted to pick your brain. I have been looking at the Sterling portfolio, and I honestly think you guys are missing a huge opportunity in the subprime commercial sector. I have some ideas that could double your Q3 projections." I almost choked. Brad was trying to mansplain the company's strategy to its VP of marketing, suggesting a move into subprime commercial, a sector Sterling had deliberately exited 2 years ago because it was volatile and unethical. Vanessa's smile tightened at the edges, a detail only I noticed. "Is that so, Brad?" "Subprime? That is a bold strategy." "It is visionary," Brad corrected, stepping closer to her, invading her personal space. "See, the problem with Sterling is that it is too conservative. You have all that old money sitting in trusts. You need fresh blood. You need someone like me who is not afraid to break a few rules to get results." Keisha chimed in, looping her arm through Brad's free arm. "He is a genius, really. You should see how he handles our household finances." "He is a wizard." I bit the inside of my cheek to keep from laughing. The wizard of debt, the sorcerer of overdraft fees. Vanessa nodded slowly, taking a sip of her champagne. Well, we are always looking for unique perspectives. Actually, Brad, I was hoping to introduce you to someone later, but tell me more about your philosophy. I am fascinated. She was baiting him. She was feeding his ego so he would hang himself with his own words, and he was eating it up. Well, Brad said, lowering his voice conspiratorially, it is all about image. Perception is reality. If you look rich, people give you money. That is why I am here. That is why I am talking to you. No offense, but you need a guy who can sell ice to an Eskimo. I can sell a shack as a palace. And what happens when the buyer realizes it is a shack? Vanessa asked, her eyes locking with mine for a split second. Brad shrugged. That is their problem. Caveat emptor, right? By then I have already cashed the check. I felt a chill run down my spine. That was his philosophy on life. That was his philosophy on our marriage. He had sold me a dream of partnership, cashed the check of my support, and now that the reality was setting in, he was walking away. Excuse me, I said, stepping forward. The weight of the coats was making my incision throb. I need to sit down for a moment. Brad spun around his face, twisting into a scowl. Seriously, Elena, we are in the middle of a high-level conversation. Do not be rude. Go find a chair in the lobby if you are tired. You are cramping the vibe. Keisha giggled. Yeah, Elena, you are looking a little pale. Maybe you should go wait in the car. We might be a while. Vanessa's glass clinked slightly as she set it on a passing waiter's tray. Actually, she said, her voice cool and sharp, I think Elena should stay. I have a feeling she might learn something. Brad laughed, slapping his knee. Learn something. Elena, that is a good one, Vanessa. She thinks Ibiza is a type of pasta, but sure, she can stay. Just, stand back a bit, hon. Hold the coats. I retreated 3 steps, my back against a marble pillar. I adjusted the heavy wool of Brad's coat, feeling the rough texture against my cheek. I watched them. Brad was leaning in, whispering in Vanessa's ear, thinking he was seducing her. Keisha was preening, looking around to see who was watching her, unaware that people were staring at the tag under her arm. They were caricatures, grotesque, selfish children playing dress-up in a world they did not understand. And I was the invisible wallflower, the prop. But as I stood there, a waiter approached me. He was an older man with silver hair and kind eyes. He held a tray with a single glass of sparkling water and a small velvet stool. Madam, he whispered, placing the stool behind me. Compliments of the gentleman in the corner. I looked up. Across the room in the shadows of the VIP balcony stood Silas. He was not looking at me. He was watching the room with a hawk's gaze. He raised his cane slightly a millimeter off the ground in a silent salute. I sat down on the stool hidden by the pillar in the crowd. I took the water. The cool liquid soothed my throat. I watched my husband flirt with my employee. I listened to him brag about being a shark. He did not know he was swimming in my tank. Suddenly the lights dimmed. A spotlight hit the stage. The CEO of the Real Estate Association walked up to the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, he boomed. Welcome. Tonight is a special night. We have a surprise announcement from our primary sponsor, Sterling Holdings. Brad grabbed Vanessa's arm. This is it, he whispered excitedly. This is the announcement. Maybe they are announcing the new hiring initiative. I told you I had a feeling about tonight. Keisha clapped her hands. Oh my God, Brad, you are basically already hired. I sat on my velvet stool, sipping my water. I knew exactly what the announcement was. I had drafted the press release myself from my hospital bed. It wasn't a hiring initiative, it was an acquisition. Sterling Holdings was acquiring the very agency Brad currently worked for, the one he was bragging about leaving. Brad was about to find out that his escape route had just been bought by the enemy, and he was standing right next to the person who signed the check. The conflict was not just escalating, it was about to explode. And I had the best seat in the house. Excuse me, I said, my voice barely rising above the hum of the string quartet. I need to use the ladies' room. Brad did not even turn his head. He was too busy leaning in close to Vanessa, laughing at a joke she hadn't made. Just go, Elena. And try to fix your hair while you are in there. You look like you just woke up from a nap." Keisha snickered into her champagne flute. "Yeah, maybe put on some lipstick, too. You look a little washed out next to all this glamour." I turned and walked away, clutching my purse against my side. I walked past the coat check, past the line of women in glittering gowns waiting for the restroom, and headed straight for a discreet alcove near the kitchen entrance. A large man in a black suit stood there, arms crossed, guarding a private elevator. To anyone else, he looked like a bouncer keeping the riffraff out. To me, he was Marcus, the head of Sterling Security. As I approached, Marcus's eyes widened slightly. He uncrossed his arms and bowed his head, a gesture so subtle no one else would notice. "Evening, madam," he murmured, pressing the call button before I could even reach for it. "They are waiting for you in the penthouse suite." I stepped into the elevator. As the heavy brass doors slid shut, cutting off the noise of the party, I felt my shoulders drop. I let out a breath I had been holding for an hour. I watched the numbers climb on the digital display: lobby, mezzanine, ballroom, and then the private floors. With every floor we passed, I shed a layer of Elena the victim. By the time the doors opened on the top floor, I was Elena Sterling. The penthouse boardroom was silent, cool, and smelled of polished mahogany and leather. A floor-to-ceiling window offered a panoramic view of the city, my city. Sitting around the long conference table were 5 people. The board of directors of Sterling Holdings. They were men and women who controlled billions of dollars, people who could shake the stock market with a whisper. And the moment I walked in, they all stood up. Silas was at the head of the table, but he immediately stepped aside, pulling out the chair for me. "Madam Chairwoman," Silas said, "we were not sure you would make it up here given the company you are keeping downstairs." I sat down, wincing slightly as my incision pulled. I ignored the pain. I placed my cheap, worn-out purse on the table next to their pristine leather folios. The contrast was striking. "I have a job to do downstairs, Silas," I said, my voice crisp and commanding. "I am currently playing the role of the downtrodden wife. It is an undercover operation. But while I am up here, let us handle business." I looked around the table. The board members looked at me with a mixture of curiosity and deep respect. They knew about the accident. They knew about the baby. They knew everything, and they were ready to go to war for me. I picked up the tablet Silas had prepared. It displayed a dossier on one specific individual, Bradley Davis. "Let us discuss the acquisition of the Miller Agency," I said. One of the board members, a sharp woman named Eleanor, cleared her throat. "The acquisition is proceeding as planned, madam. We are set to absorb their assets by Monday morning. However, we have a personnel question. The Miller Agency has put forward a recommendation for a Mr. Bradley Davis to be retained and promoted to senior director. Apparently, he claims to have a close relationship with the Sterling family." I let out a short, dry laugh. "He does. Just not the one he thinks." I swiped the screen, looking at Brad's employment file. It was pathetic. Missed targets complaints from HR about inappropriate behavior and a credit check that looked like a crime scene. "Here are my instructions," I said, looking up to meet their eyes. "First, regarding the Miller Agency acquisition, it goes through, but the personnel list needs editing. Bradley Davis is not to be promoted. In fact, I want his current position made difficult. What is the status of his current accounts?" Silas leaned forward. "He is currently managing the grand opening of the Riverside complex. He is behind schedule and over budget, but he has been hiding the numbers from his current boss, Mr. Henderson." "Excellent," I said. "Silas, I want you to leak the real numbers to Mr. Henderson. Tonight, send him the raw data. Let him see exactly how much money Brad has been losing while he is busy partying downstairs." "Done," Silas said, tapping a note into his phone. Second, I continued, my voice dropping lower. "I want to talk about his personal assets, or rather his lack thereof. Silas, you mentioned the apartment building in Queens. We closed on the building yesterday, madam. You are now the landlord of record for the entire complex. Good. Now I want you to buy the mortgage. Not the building mortgage, I mean his personal debt. I want you to buy the debt on his car. I want you to buy the debt on his credit cards. I want Sterling Holdings to own every single penny he owes to anyone in this world." Eleanor looked surprised. "Madam, that is highly unusual. High-risk consumer debt is not typically part of our portfolio. "It is not an investment, Eleanor," I said coldly. "It is a leash. When the time comes, I want to be the one pulling it. I want him to realize that he does not just owe the bank. He owes me. Every shirt on his back, every drink in his hand, the very car he drives to work, I want to own it all." "I understand," Eleanor said, writing it down quickly. "We will execute the debt purchase by morning." I stood up. The meeting was over. I had to get back before they sent a search party, or more likely before they forgot I existed entirely. "One more thing," I said, pausing at the door. "That woman downstairs, Keisha. She is wearing a necklace, a silver locket." Silas nodded. "Your mother's locket. I saw it on the security feed. It took every ounce of my restraint not to go down there and remove it myself." "Leave it," I said, "for now. Let her wear it. It is evidence. When I take everything from them, I want that locket to be the last thing I take. I want her to feel the loss of it." I stepped back into the elevator. The doors closed on the quiet power of the boardroom, and I began the descent back into hell. When the elevator opened on the ground floor, I adjusted my dress, hunched my shoulders slightly, and put the mask of the submissive wife back on. I walked back into the ballroom, the noise hitting me like a physical blow. I found them near the bar. But the atmosphere had changed. Brad was no longer laughing. He was not leaning in close to Vanessa. He was standing stiffly, his face a mask of panic, while a short, angry man with a red face screamed at him. It was Mr. Henderson, his boss at the Miller Agency. "You are a liar and a fraud, Davis." Mr. Henderson was shouting, not caring who heard. "I just got an email from the audit team. You told me the Riverside project was under budget. These numbers say we are bleeding $50,000 a week. You are here drinking champagne while my project is burning to the ground." Brad was stammering, his hands up in a defensive posture. "Mr. Henderson, please, there must be a mistake. I have the spreadsheets on my laptop. It is a glitch. I was going to explain on Monday." "Monday." Mr. Henderson spat the word out. "You better pray you have a job on Monday. You are lucky I do not fire you right here in front of half of New York. Get out of my face. Go fix this mess. I want a full report on my desk by 8 a.m. tomorrow, or you are finished." Mr. Henderson stormed off, leaving Brad standing there humiliated. The circle of people around them had widened, everyone trying to pretend they had not just witnessed a public dressing down. Keisha was looking at her phone, pretending to be busy, distancing herself from the embarrassment. Vanessa was sipping her drink, watching Brad with a cool, detached amusement. I walked up to them, feigning ignorance. "Is everything okay?" I asked softly. I heard shouting. Brad spun around, his eyes wild with rage. He needed a target, and there I was. "You," he hissed, stabbing a finger in my face. "This is your fault. My fault." I blinked, genuinely confused by his logic. "I was in the restroom, Brad." "How is your work performance my fault? You are bad luck, Elena," he shouted. "Ever since you sat down, the energy shifted. You come here with your gloomy face and your cheap dress, and you jinxed me. I was having a great conversation. I was closing the deal, and then you showed up, and suddenly Henderson gets an audit report. It is you. You are a black cloud." Keisha chimed in, eager to kick me while I was down. "He is right, Elena. You really bring the vibe down. Maybe you should just wait outside. You are clearly stressing him out." I looked at Brad. He was sweating, his tie slightly crooked, his eyes darting around the room to see who was watching. He was crumbling under the slightest bit of pressure. And he blamed me. He blamed the woman whose fortune was the only reason he was even standing in this room. "I am sorry, Brad," I said, lowering my head to hide the small, satisfied smile playing on my lips. "I did not mean to be a distraction. Maybe I should go home." "No," Brad snapped. "You are not going home. You are staying right here. You are going to hold my coat, and you are going to hold my drink, and you are going to stand there and be quiet while I try to salvage this night. I need to find Vanessa. I need to smooth this over. Do not move." He shoved his empty glass into my hand and stormed off toward the VIP section, dragging Keisha with him. I stood there holding his sticky glass. I looked down at the liquid remaining at the bottom. It was flat and warm, just like Brad. I turned slightly and saw Silas standing in the shadows of the balcony again. He gave me a slow nod. Phase 1 was complete. The mortgage was bought. The career was blocked. The humiliation had begun. I took a sip of my own water and watched my husband run across the room, desperate to impress the woman who had just signed his death warrant. He thought I was his bad luck charm. He had no idea. I wasn't bad luck. I was karma. And I was just getting started. It was 2 a.m. when the lock tumbled. I was sitting on the lumpy beige sofa, the one that had been my bed for the last week, nursing a cup of lukewarm tea. The apartment was dark, illuminated only by the streetlights filtering through the thin curtains I had sewn myself 3 years ago. My body was aching. The gala had been a physical marathon for someone just days out of surgery, but the adrenaline of what was coming kept me upright. The door swung open with aggressive force, banging against the stopper. Brad stumbled in, loosening his tie with a jerky, frustrated motion. Keisha followed close behind, kicking off her heels and letting them land wherever they fell. The smell of stale champagne and arrogance filled the small room instantly. They did not expect to see me awake. Brad stopped blinking at me with glossy, bloodshot eyes. He looked like a man who had convinced himself he was a king, despite the mud on his shoes. Still up, he slurred slightly, walking over to the fridge and pulling out a beer. He did not ask how I was. He did not ask about my pain. He just cracked the can open, the sound sharp in the silence. "I am waiting for you," I said calmly. "We need to talk about tonight." Brad laughed, a harsh barking sound. "Talk. Yeah, we need to talk. Actually, I am glad you are awake. It saves me the trouble of waking you up to kick you out." He reached into his jacket pocket, the jacket I had brushed lint off of just hours before, and pulled out a folded packet of papers. He tossed them onto the coffee table. They landed with a heavy thud, sliding across the cheap laminate surface until they hit my tea mug. I looked down. Petition for dissolution of marriage. The bold black letters seemed to vibrate in the dim light. "I am done, Elena," Brad said, taking a long swig of beer. "I am done pretending this works." Tonight was a wake-up call, standing there with Vanessa, seeing how a real woman operates. It made me realize how much I have been settling. He began to pace the small living room, gesturing wildly with the beer can. Vanessa gets it. She understands the game. Even when Henderson was yelling at me, did you see her face? She was looking at me with sympathy. She knows I am being held back by incompetent management. She whispered to me before we left Elena. She said, "Call me on Monday. We have things to discuss." I took a sip of my tea to hide the smile threatening to break through. Vanessa had indeed said that, because I had texted her to say it. The discussion she wanted to have was about his termination, but Brad heard what he wanted to hear. "So you are leaving me for a woman you met 3 hours ago?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "A woman who is the vice president of a company you do not even work for yet." Brad stopped pacing and looked at me with genuine pity. "It is not just about Vanessa Elena. It is about trajectory. She is up here," he held his hand high above his head. "And you are down here. You are an anchor. You have no ambition. You have no style. You are just plain. I am going to be a director at Sterling Holdings. I need a wife who looks the part. Vanessa is that wife." Keisha, who had been rummaging through the kitchen cabinets, walked into the living room eating a bag of chips. She leaned against the wall, smirking. "He is right. You know," she said, crumbs falling onto her chin. "You really do not fit in his world anymore, Elena. I mean, look at you. You are wearing sweatpants. Vanessa was wearing a $3,000 suit. It is embarrassing for him to be seen with you." She walked over to the coffee table and tapped the divorce papers with a long acrylic fingernail. Besides, she continued, her eyes gleaming with greed. "Brad and I talked about the settlement. Since you contributed nothing to this household, I mean, Brad paid all the bills, right? It is only fair that you leave with nothing." I looked at Brad. "Is that true?" Brad shrugged, avoiding my eyes. "Look, Elena, be reasonable. I bought the furniture, I paid the rent, I paid for the food. You just existed. So yeah, the lawyer drafted it up. You get your personal effects, clothes, books, whatever junk you have in your boxes. I keep the apartment, the car, the furniture, and the electronics. Consider it compensation for the last 5 years. I could have been dating models, but I wasted my prime with you. Compensation for his prime." The words hung in the air, heavy and toxic. I thought about the 5 years. I thought about the nights I stayed up helping him write his resume because he could not spell. I thought about the 3 jobs I worked to pay off his gambling debts from that trip to Vegas he swore was for business. I thought about the $40,000 of my savings he had stolen while I was bleeding on a hospital bed. And now he wanted the toaster. He wanted the couch. He wanted the apartment that was technically owned by me as of yesterday morning. A strange cold clarity washed over me. It was the eerie calm Silas had spoken about. It was the sterling blood waking up. I did not feel sad. I did not feel angry. I felt like a surgeon looking at a gangrenous limb knowing exactly where to cut. I reached for the papers. I flipped through them. He was right. It was a total surrender. I waived all rights to alimony. I waived all claims to marital assets. I agreed to vacate the premises immediately. Brad watched me, a smug grin spreading across his face. He thought I was beaten. He thought I was reading it to look for a loophole, but finding none. "Do not bother reading the fine print," he sneered. "It is ironclad. My lawyer said you would be an idiot not to sign. If you fight this, I will drag it out for years. I will make sure you drown in legal fees. I will tell everyone you were abusive. I will ruin your reputation at that sad little library." He was threatening to ruin a librarian. The smallness of his mind was almost impressive. I picked up a pen from the table. It was a cheap plastic promotional pen from a bank, the same bank that had rejected his loan application. I did not hesitate. I did not cry. I did not ask for a second chance. I pressed the pen to the paper and signed my name. Elena Davis. The sound of the pen scratching against the paper was loud in the quiet room. Scritch. Scratch. Done. I closed the folder and pushed it back across the table toward him. There I said, my voice devoid of emotion, "You are free!" Brad blinked clearly, stunned by how easy it was. He snatched the papers up, checking the signature as if he expected me to have signed Mickey Mouse. When he saw my name, he let out a whoop of victory. "Yes," he shouted, pumping his fist. "Finally, man, I thought you were going to cry and beg. I thought I was going to have to call the cops to get you out." He turned to Keisha and high-fived her. "We did it, baby. We are free. The penthouse life, here we come." Keisha squealed and hugged him. "Oh my God, Brad, you are amazing. See, I told you she knew her place." She turned to me, her expression shifting instantly from joy to malice. "Okay, since that is settled, you need to pack. Like now. I want to turn the living room into a yoga studio by tomorrow and leave the Dyson vacuum. Okay, I know you bought it, but consider it a cleaning fee for all the time you stayed here rent-free." I stood up. My incision throbbed, a sharp reminder of my mortality, but I pushed it aside. I walked to the closet and pulled out my duffel bag, the same one I had brought from the hospital. I did not need to pack. I had never unpacked. I knew this moment was coming. I picked up the bag and slung it over my shoulder. I looked around the apartment one last time. The peeling paint on the ceiling, the stain on the rug where Brad had spilled red wine and blamed me, the claustrophobic walls that had held me prisoner for 5 years. I felt lighter. I walked to the door. Brad and Keisha were already popping another beer, celebrating their victory. They did not even look at me. "Brad," I said, my hand on the doorknob. He glanced over his shoulder, impatient. "What now?" "Do not ask for money for a cab. You have legs." "I am not asking for money," I said. "I just wanted to give you a piece of advice, since you are the man of the house now." Brad rolled his eyes. "Save it, Elena. I do not need advice from a loser." I smiled. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of a predator who knows the trap has already snapped shut. "I just hope you have enough money for next month's rent," I said softly. Brad laughed. "Rent, please. I have plenty of money. And once I start at Sterling, I will buy this dump just to burn it down." I nodded. "Good luck with that." I opened the door and stepped out into the hallway. I did not slam it. I closed it gently with a final decisive click. As I walked down the dimly lit corridor, I heard them laughing inside. They were laughing at me. They were toasting to my departure. I pulled out my phone. It was 2:15 a.m. "Silas," I whispered into the receiver. "Yes, madam. I am downstairs. I have signed the papers. I am out." "Excellent," Silas replied. The legal team has been on standby. We will file the papers the moment the court opens. The divorce will be finalized by noon. And Silas, yes, madam, execute the rent increase. Triple it. And send the notice immediately. I want it slid under their door before the sun comes up. Consider it done. I stepped out onto the sidewalk. The night air was cool and crisp. The black town car was waiting, its engine purring softly. Silas stepped out and opened the rear door for me. "Where to, madam?" he asked. I looked back up at the fourth-floor window. I could see the flickering blue light of the television. They were up there, confident, arrogant, and completely doomed. "Take me to the penthouse, Silas," I said, sliding into the leather seat. "I have a company to run, and I need to pick out an outfit for my first day as their boss." As the car pulled away, I did not look back. Elena Davis, the submissive wife, had died in that apartment. Elena Sterling was alive, and she was hungry. The heavy door of the town car clicked shut, sealing me inside a cocoon of silence and expensive leather. The air conditioner hummed softly, a stark contrast to the chaotic, stale warmth of the apartment I had just left. I watched the building recede through the tinted rear window. Up on the fourth floor, the lights were still blazing. They were probably opening another round of beers, toasting to their freedom, to the departure of the dead weight that was Elena Davis. They had no idea that the dead weight was actually the anchor that had been keeping their entire ship from capsizing. I pulled my phone from my purse. The screen glowed bright in the dim interior of the car. I opened the secure messaging app that connected me directly to the Sterling financial team and Silas. My thumb hovered over the send button. It was a small movement, a fraction of an inch, but it carried the weight of a judge's gavel. "Execute," I typed. I pressed send. Phase 1 of the financial freeze had begun. I leaned back against the seat, closing my eyes, visualizing the dominoes starting to fall. I did not need to be in the room to know exactly what was happening. I knew Brad's habits better than he knew himself. I knew that right about now, 5 minutes after I walked out, the initial euphoria would fade just enough for hunger or greed to set in. They would want to order food, sushi probably, from that expensive place on Fifth Avenue that delivered late. Brad always ordered the platinum platter when he wanted to feel like a big shot. I opened the surveillance app on the tablet Silas had left for me in the car. The video feed from the living room camera, hidden discreetly in the smoke detector, flickered to life. The image was crisp. There they were. Brad was lounging on the sofa, his feet propped up on the coffee table, right where the divorce papers had been minutes ago. Keisha was scrolling through her phone, probably looking for a new outfit to buy for her imaginary debut as the next Mrs. Davis. Linda was in the kitchen, rummaging for snacks that did not exist. "Let us order the Wagyu beef rolls," Brad announced, pulling out his phone. "And 2 bottles of Moet. We need to celebrate properly." "Right. No more penny pinching. I am a free man." He tapped on his delivery app. I watched on the screen as he scrolled, selected, and hit the order button. I counted down in my head. 3, 2, 1. On the screen, Brad frowned. He tapped the phone again. "That is weird," he muttered. "It says payment declined." "Try the other card," Keisha said without looking up. "The gold one. I am trying the gold one," Brad snapped. "It is probably just a fraud alert because I am ordering big. The bank knows I am making moves." He tried again. I saw his thumb jab the screen harder this time. Declined. Brad sat up straight, the beer can in his hand tilting dangerously. "What the hell? I just paid the bill last week." "He did not pay the bill. I paid the bill. I always paid the bill." Brad liked to carry the cards, specifically the American Express Gold Card and the Sapphire Reserve, because he liked the weight of them. He liked the sound they made when he tossed them onto a dinner table. But he never understood how they worked. He assumed that because his name was on the plastic, the credit was his. He did not know that 7 years ago, when his credit score was in the low 500s due to missed student loan payments, I had added him as an authorized user to my accounts. My accounts. My credit history. My perfect payment record. The moment I sent that text to Silas, I had removed him as an authorized user. In the blink of an eye, Brad's credit score had plummeted from a 750 back to the sub-500 reality he actually lived in. His cards were now just useless pieces of plastic. "Call them," Linda yelled from the kitchen. Tell them who you are. Tell them you are a director at Sterling Holdings. Brad dialed the customer service number, putting it on speaker so he could act tough in front of his audience. Yeah, this is Bradley Davis, he barked into the phone. My card is not working. You guys need to fix this immediately. I have a very important purchase to make. The voice on the other end was calm, professional, and devastating. I am sorry, Mr. Davis. I see here that the primary account holder, Mrs. Elena Davis, has removed your authorization effective 10 minutes ago. All cards associated with your profile have been deactivated. The room went silent. Keisha looked up from her phone. Linda stopped chewing. What? Brad stammered. No, that is a mistake. I am the husband. It is my money. I am afraid the account was opened solely in Ms. Davis. Name, sir, the operator continued. You were listed only as a guest user. Without her authorization, you have no access to this credit line. Is there anything else I can help you with? Brad hung up the phone, his face draining of color. He looked at the card in his hand as if it had just bitten him. She cut me off, he whispered. That petty little... She cut me off. Use your debit card, baby, Keisha said, sounding annoyed. Just pay cash. Who cares about credit? Brad swallowed hard. He opened his banking app. I knew exactly what he would see. 0. Or rather, negative numbers, because the automatic transfer I used to make from my paycheck to cover his car insurance had also been canceled, and the insurance company had just attempted to auto-draft the payment. I need to move some money around. Brad lied, his voice trembling. It will take a few days. Banks are closed. Just then, a sharp, authoritative knock echoed from the front door. Brad jumped. Who is that? It is 3 a.m. He walked to the door and opened it. No one was there, but lying on the welcome mat was a thick, cream-colored envelope with a red wax seal. It looked official. It looked expensive. Brad picked it up and ripped it open. He pulled out a single sheet of heavy bonded paper. He read it, and I saw his knees actually buckle. He had to grab the door frame to stay upright. What is it? Linda asked, rushing over. Is it a lawsuit? Did she sue us? It is from the landlord, Brad choked out. Or the new management company, Sterling Real Estate Trust. He walked back into the living room, reading the letter aloud, his voice shaking. Dear tenant, this notice is to inform you that the building has been acquired by new ownership. Effective immediately, all legacy rental agreements are null and void under the gentrification clause of your lease. He paused, swallowing air. The new monthly rent for this unit, adjusted to current market value and luxury tax assessment, will be $7,500 per month. $7,000! Linda shrieked. We pay $2,500. That is illegal. It gets worse, Brad said, reading further. If the tenant does not wish to accept the new rate, they have the option to purchase the unit for the sum of $1.2 million. Payment or proof of financing must be presented within 24 hours, or eviction proceedings will commence immediately. Keisha stood up, her face twisting in fury. Eviction. Start packing. Brad, you said you paid the rent this month. You said we were safe. I did. Brad yelled back. I paid the old rent. They are changing the rules. They cannot do this. They can, actually. I had reviewed the lease agreement myself years ago. There was a clause buried in the fine print on page 30 that allowed for immediate renegotiation in the event of a building sale. Brad had never read page 30. He barely read page 1. 24 hours, Brad whispered. Where am I going to get $7,000 or $1 million? Ask your rich girlfriend? Linda snapped, pointing at Keisha. She has money, does not she? She is always bragging about her family's connections. Keisha, help him out. All eyes turned to Keisha. She froze. The facade of the wealthy socialite she had been playing began to crack. She shifted her weight, clutching her purse tighter. My money is tied up, Keisha stammered, in investments, crypto. I cannot liquidate it right now. The market is down. Investments, Brad said, looking at her with a sudden dawning suspicion. You told me you had $50,000 in cash sitting in a safe. You told me you could buy this place if you wanted to. I do, Keisha yelled defensively, but I am not going to throw it away on rent. This is your mess, Brad. You are the man. Fix it. She grabbed her purse, the one Brad had bought her last week, as a sorry I can't leave my wife yet gift, and marched toward the bedroom. I am going to sleep, she announced. Figure it out by morning or I am going to a hotel. She threw the purse onto the armchair. It landed awkwardly, and the strap, which was supposed to be high-grade Italian leather, snapped clean off. The bag tumbled to the floor, spilling its contents, lip gloss, a lighter, and a crumpled receipt. But it was not the contents that mattered. It was the bag itself. Where the strap had broken, the material was peeling. Underneath the fake brown leather was white, cheap cardboard. Brad stared at the bag. He walked over and picked it up. He looked at the broken strap. He peeled back a little more of the material. "Cardboard," he whispered. He looked at Keisha. "This is the bag I bought you, the one you said cost $3,000. You made me give you the cash so you could buy it from your exclusive plug." Keisha froze. Her eyes darted around the room, looking for an exit. Brad ripped the lining of the bag open. Stamped on the inside in faint ink were the words, "Made in China. PVC material, not for resale." "You took my $3,000, Brad said, his voice rising to a scream. "And you bought a knockoff." Keisha stepped back, her hands up. "Brad, baby, listen. I needed the money for bills. For us. I was saving it for our future." "You lied to me," Brad roared. He threw the bag across the room. It hit the wall with a pathetic thud. "Everything is a lie. The money, the connections, the bag." "And what about you?" Keisha screamed back, dropping the act entirely. "You lied too. You said you were a big shot. You said you had access to the sterling fortune. Look at you. Your card is declined. You are getting evicted. You are a broke loser, Brad. That is why Elena left you. Even the mouse knew when to jump off a sinking ship." "Don't you talk about her," Linda yelled, jumping into the fray. "At least Elena cooked and cleaned. You just sit there and eat our food." I watched the screen mesmerized. It was imploding. The alliance of greed was devouring itself. Without my money to act as the glue, they were tearing each other apart. Brad was realizing he had traded a loyal, wealthy wife for a liar with a cardboard purse. Keisha was realizing she had attached herself to a drowning man. I tapped the screen of the tablet, switching off the video feed. I had seen enough. The chaos was self-sustaining now. I did not need to do anything else. I looked out the window of the car. We were crossing the bridge into Manhattan. The skyline glittered before me, a mountain of diamonds against the velvet night. Somewhere in that city was my new home. A penthouse that I owned, not rented. A bed with sheets that did not smell of betrayal. Silas turned around in the front seat. "We have arrived at the plaza, madam. Your suite is ready, and I have confirmed that the rent notice was received." I smiled. It was a cold, sharp smile. "Thank you, Silas." And the credit cards, all terminated. The final report shows he attempted to purchase a bottle of Dom Perignon and a Wagyu platter. Both declined. I laughed softly. Wagyu. He really thought he was celebrating. "He will be lucky if he can afford ramen noodles tomorrow," Silas noted dryly. I stepped out of the car. The doorman at the plaza rushed to open the door, bowing low. "Welcome back, Ms. Sterling." Ms. Sterling. The name sounded right. It sounded heavy, like armor. I walked into the lobby, my head held high. I was no longer the woman who clipped coupons. I was the woman who set the price. Back in Queens, the rats were fighting over the crumbs I had left behind. But here, the world was mine. Tomorrow, the real game would begin. Tomorrow, I would step into Sterling Holdings, not as a visitor, but as the owner. And Brad would find out that the eviction notice was just the appetizer. The main course was going to be his total destruction. The morning sun over Central Park was different from the morning sun in Queens. In Queens, the light was gray, filtered through smog and dirty window panes illuminating the dust motes and the cracks in the ceiling. Here, in the penthouse suite of the plaza, the light was gold. It felt heavy, expensive, and warm. I sat on the velvet chaise lounge, a cup of freshly brewed Blue Mountain coffee in my hand, watching the city wake up below me. Silas stood by the fireplace, tapping away on his tablet. He looked up, a small, mischievous glint in his usually stoic eyes. "It is sent, madam," he said softly. "The bait is in the water." I took a sip of coffee. "And the timing." "Perfectly calculated," Silas replied. "He received the eviction notice at 3 a.m. He has been panicking for exactly 5 hours. He is desperate, sleep-deprived, and irrational. This email will look like a life raft to a drowning man." I nodded. "Open the audio feed. I want to hear the moment he bites." Silas tapped the screen, and the room was filled with the sounds of my old apartment. It was chaotic. I could hear items being thrown into boxes, the screech of packing tape, and Linda's shrill voice complaining about her back. "I cannot believe we have to leave today," Linda was shouting. "Where are we supposed to go, Brad? We have no money for a hotel. That witch froze everything." "I am working on it, Mom," Brad yelled back. His voice was cracked, teetering on the edge of hysteria. "I am calling everyone. I just need a bridge loan. Once I get a job, it will be fine." "You do not have a job," Keisha screamed. "You have a cardboard purse and a foreclosure notice. We are going to be homeless in 6 hours." And then the notification sound chimed. It was the specific, cheerful ping of an email arriving on Brad's phone. I held my breath. Silence fell over the apartment in Queens. I could hear Brad breathing heavily. Then a gasp. "Oh my God," Brad whispered. "Oh my God. You guys. Shut up and listen to this." What Keisha snapped. "Did another bill come through?" "No," Brad said, his voice rising in disbelief. "It is an email from Sterling Holdings, Human Resources." He began to read aloud, stumbling over the words in his excitement. "Dear Mr. Davis, following a review of your profile and highly recommended internal referral, we are pleased to invite you for an immediate final round interview for the position of Senior Director of Operations." Senior Director Linda gasped. "Brad, that is huge. That is the executive level." "Wait, let me finish," Brad said. "Due to the urgent nature of this vacancy, we are conducting interviews today at 10 a.m. at our headquarters. The starting salary package for this role is..." He paused, choking on the number. $350,000 a year, plus bonuses and stock options. $350,000, Keisha shrieked. "Oh my God, we are rich! We are saved!" Brad let out a whoop of joy that was so loud it distorted the audio feed. I told you I was a shark. I told you, Vanessa liked me. This is her doing. She must have pulled strings overnight. She saw my potential." I sat back in the chaise lounge, a cold smile touching my lips. Vanessa had indeed pulled strings, but only because I told her which strings to pull. The salary was real. The position was real. The only thing that wasn't real was his chance of getting it. But he did not know that. He saw a number that would solve all his problems, and his ego filled in the rest. "I better get ready," Brad said, his panic completely replaced by arrogance. "Where is my Navy suit? The one Elena. The one that is in the dry cleaning bag. It is in the pile," Keisha said, her voice dripping with sudden affection. "Baby, you are going to kill it. You are going to be a director. I knew you could do it. I never doubted you." 10 minutes ago, she called him a broke loser. Money really was the best amnesia drug on the market. "I need to call her," Brad said suddenly. "Call who?" Vanessa Linda asked. "No. Elena. I need to call Elena." "Why?" Keisha asked. "Screw her. She kicked us out." "Exactly," Brad said, and I could practically hear the sneer in his voice. "She thinks she won. She thinks she ruined me. I want her to know that while she is counting coupons, I am about to sign a contract worth more than her entire life. I want to hear her cry." Silas looked at me, his eyebrow raised. "Do you want to take the call, madam?" I set my coffee cup down. "Absolutely. Put him on speaker." My phone on the marble table began to buzz. The caller ID flashed Brad. I picked up, making my voice sound small and tired. "Hello?" Elena. Brad boomed. The fear was gone from his voice, replaced by a manic, gloating energy. "I hope you are happy with your little stunt last night. Freezing the cards, buying the debt. Very cute." "I am just protecting myself, Brad," I said softly. "Protecting yourself?" Brad laughed. "You are trying to destroy me. But here is the news flash, honey. You missed. You missed big time." "What are you talking about?" I asked, feigning ignorance. "I just got the call," Brad said, lying effortlessly. "From Sterling Holdings. Apparently my performance at the gala last night made quite an impression. They want me. They want me for the senior director position." "Really?" I said. "That is surprising." "Is it?" Brad scoffed. "Is it surprising that a top-tier company recognizes talent?" I know it is hard for you to understand living in your small little world, but people like me, Elena, we always land on our feet. In fact, we land in the penthouse." He paused for effect. "I am looking at the offer letter right now." He lied again. 350 grand. Starting. That is 30 grand a month, Elena. I can buy that apartment you kicked me out of in cash by Christmas. I can buy 10 of them. Congratulations, I said. I hope you spend it wisely. "Oh, I will," Brad said. "I am going to buy a real car. I am going to buy Keisha that bag she wanted, the real one. And I am going to hire the best lawyers in the city to make sure you do not see a single dime of it." You walked away. Remember? You signed the papers. You get nothing. Zero. "I know what I signed, Brad." "Do you?" he sneered. "Because right now you sound like a woman who realizes she just made the biggest mistake of her life. You thought I was drowning, but I am just learning to swim with the big fish. Meanwhile, where are you? Probably crashing on a friend's couch crying over your old wedding photos." I looked around the 3,000 square foot suite. I looked at the hand-painted frescoes on the ceiling. I looked at Silas, who was meticulously arranging my schedule for the day. "I am managing Brad. I am actually doing okay." "Yeah, sure you are," he laughed. "Look, I have to go. I have a meeting with the board. VIPs only. You would not understand. I just wanted to call and say, thank you. Thank you for showing your true colors. It made it so much easier to replace you." He hung up. The line went dead. I sat there for a moment listening to the silence. He thought he had crushed me. He thought he had delivered the final blow. He had no idea he had just read his own eulogy to the executioner. Silas stepped forward. "The car is ready, madam. We need to be at headquarters in 30 minutes to prepare for the interview panel." I stood up, shedding the invisible weight of Elena Davis. I walked into the dressing room. Hanging on the rack was a suit Silas had procured for me. It was white, sharp-tailored, immaculate white. It was a power suit. It was the kind of suit a woman wears when she owns the building, the company, and the soul of the man walking into her trap. I dressed slowly. I put on the pearl earrings my grandfather had left me. I applied a coat of red lipstick, blood red. "Let us go, Silas," I said. "I do not want to be late for my first hire, or should I say my first fire." Meanwhile, across the river, Brad was putting on his navy suit. I could imagine him looking in the mirror, adjusting his tie, telling himself he was the king of New York. He was probably yelling at Keisha to iron his shirt faster. He was probably calculating how soon he could lease a Porsche. He left the apartment in Queens with his head held high, ignoring the eviction notice taped to the door. He hailed a cab he couldn't afford, putting the charge on a credit card he didn't know was canceled yet. Or maybe he used Keisha's cash. It did not matter. He was heading to Fifth Avenue. He was heading to me. I arrived at Sterling Holdings 20 minutes later. The glass tower pierced the sky, a monument to my family's legacy. Security guards bowed as I walked through the private entrance. The lobby was bustling with activity, but a hush fell as I passed. They did not know who I was yet, but they knew power when they saw it. I took the private elevator to the top floor. The boardroom was prepped. My seat was at the head of the table. To my right sat the vice president of HR. To my left, Vanessa Thorne. She looked up as I entered. "He is in the lobby," Vanessa said, checking her phone. "He is yelling at the receptionist because his visitor badge does not say VIP. I sat down, spinning the leather chair to face the door. "Let him yell," I said. "It will be the last noise he makes in this building." I looked at the file in front of me. It contained the fake offer letter, the real debt reports, and the photos of him with Keisha. It was a dossier of destruction. Brad thought he was walking into a coronation. He thought he was walking into a room of admirers who would hand him a check and a key to the executive washroom. He thought he was going to walk out of here and call me again to laugh. He was wrong. I tapped the intercom button. "Send him in." I heard the heavy oak doors creak open behind me. I did not turn around immediately. I wanted him to see the view first. I wanted him to see the back of the chair. I wanted him to feel the intimidation of the room. "Wow," I heard Brad's voice. It was hushed, reverent. "This view is incredible. Please take a seat, Mr. Davis," the HR director said. "The chairwoman will be with you in a moment." "Chairwoman," Brad whispered. "I thought I was meeting with the VP." "The chairwoman takes a personal interest in senior leadership," Vanessa said smoothly. I heard the scrape of a chair. Brad sat down. I could feel his nervousness, his excitement. He was sitting 10 feet away from me. So Brad said, his voice regaining its swagger, "I want to thank you for this opportunity. I have to say, looking at your operations, I see a lot of potential for growth. I have some ideas about cost cutting that I think you will love. I was telling my wife, well, my ex-wife, that you guys need a shark, and I am that shark." I smiled at my reflection in the window. "A shark?" I slowly spun the chair around. "Is that so, Brad?" I asked. "Tell me more about these cost-cutting measures, specifically the ones involving your own wife's life savings." Brad froze. His mouth was open mid-sentence. He blinked. He squinted. He looked at me, then at Vanessa, then back at me. His brain could not process the image. He saw Elena. But he saw Elena in a white suit sitting in the chairwoman's seat, flanked by the executives he worshipped. "Elena," he whispered. The word came out like a choke. What are you doing here? Did you follow me? How did you get in?" "Security." He stood up, looking around frantically. "Security. My stalker ex-wife is in the room. Get her out." Vanessa did not move. The HR director did not move. They just stared at him. "Sit down, Brad," I said. My voice was not loud, but it slammed into him like a physical force. He sat, not because he wanted to, but because his legs gave out. I do not understand," he stammered. "You are the coat check girl. You are the librarian. Why are you sitting in the big chair?" "Because, Brad," I said, leaning forward and lacing my fingers together, "I own the chair. I own the table. I own the building. And as of yesterday, I own you." I watched the color drain from his face. It started at his forehead and washed down to his neck, leaving him a pale, trembling shade of gray. "You own Sterling Holdings," I finished for him. "My grandfather was Archibald Sterling. I am the sole heiress." Brad's eyes rolled back slightly as if he might faint. He gripped the edge of the table. "No," he wheezed. "No. That is impossible. You clipped coupons. You shopped at Goodwill. I told you to hold my coat." "Yes," I said. "You did. And I did. I held your coat while you spent my money. I held your secrets while you betrayed me. And now I am holding your future." I slid the file across the table. It stopped right in front of his shaking hands. "Open it." Brad opened the folder. He saw the debt purchases. He saw the eviction notice with my signature on the bottom. He saw the termination letter from the Miller Agency, which I had authorized an hour ago. "You thought you were coming here for a job, Brad," I said. "But you do not interview for a job at your own execution." Brad looked up at me. There was no arrogance left, no swagger, just raw, naked terror. "Elena, please," he whispered. "Baby, I didn't know." I leaned back, tapping my finger on the armrest. "Good luck, Brad. You will need it. Let us rewind the clock 20 minutes. While I was sitting in the executive suite preparing for the kill, Brad and Keisha were downstairs in the lobby of Sterling Holdings, putting on a performance that would have been comical if it were not so pathetic. I watched them on the high-definition security monitors that lined the wall of my private office. It was like watching a nature documentary about two scavengers trying to bluff their way into a lion's den. They arrived in a yellow taxi, not a town car. Brad stepped out first, adjusting his navy suit jacket as if he were straightening a crown. He looked up at the glass skyscraper with a hunger that made my stomach turn. Keisha scrambled out after him, clutching her broken purse under her arm to hide the cardboard entrails. She was wearing a dress that was too short for a nightclub, let alone a corporate headquarters, and she had clearly spent the morning curling her hair to look like what she imagined a rich woman looked like. I turned up the volume on the feed. "I am telling you," Brad said, checking his reflection in the revolving glass door. "This is it. Once I sign the contract, I am going to demand a signing bonus. We will go straight to the Porsche dealership." Keisha giggled, linking her arm through his. "Get a black one, babe. Black looks more executive. And make sure they put my name on the insurance this time." They pushed through the doors and marched up to the main reception desk. The receptionist, a young woman named Sarah, who had been with the company for 3 years, looked up with a polite, professional smile. "Welcome to Sterling Holdings," she said. "How may I help you?" Brad leaned his elbow on the high marble counter, flashing a grin that he thought was charming, but actually looked predatory. "I am Bradley Davis," he announced loud enough for the people in the waiting area to hear. I am here for the senior director interview. I am expected. Sarah typed his name into her terminal. Her brow furrowed slightly. I see your appointment, Mr. Davis. But I do not have a visitor badge pre-printed for a guest named Keisha. Is she part of the interview panel? Brad laughed, waving his hand dismissively. She is with me. She is my personal advisor. Just print her a badge. And make sure it says VIP. We do not want to be stopped by security every 5 feet. I am afraid I cannot do that, sir, Sarah said, her voice remaining steady. Our security protocol is very strict. Only the candidate is allowed up to the executive floors. Your guest will have to wait here in the lobby. Keisha's face twisted into a scowl. Excuse me, do you know who he is? He is going to be running this place by lunch. You really want to start your day by annoying your future boss. Just give me the badge. Brad tapped his fingers on the marble, impatient. Look, sweetheart, just call Vanessa Thorne. She will clear it. Tell her Brad is here and he brought his lucky charm. Sarah paused, looking at them with a mixture of confusion and pity. She picked up the phone and dialed the extension I had given her earlier. Ms. Thorne, she said softly, Mr. Davis is here. He is insisting on bringing a guest up. Yes, ma'am. Understood. She hung up and printed 2 badges. She slid them across the counter. Ms. Thorne has made a one-time exception, Sarah said. Please take elevator bank B to the 50th floor. Someone will meet you there. C. Brad sneered, snatching the badges. Was that so hard? Learn to recognize power when you see it, sweetheart. It might save your job later. He turned and strutted toward the elevators, Keisha trotting beside him on her high heels, sticking her tongue out at the receptionist's back. I watched them go, shaking my head. They had bullied a receptionist. That was their level. They felt big by making someone else feel small. I switched the camera feed to the boardroom. Vanessa and the HR director, Mr. Sterling, no relation, just a happy coincidence, were already seated. I had instructed them to let Brad speak. I wanted him to dig his hole so deep that he would never climb out. The elevator doors opened on the 50th floor, and Brad and Keisha stepped out. Their eyes went wide. The hallway was lined with original artwork, and the carpet was so thick it swallowed the sound of their footsteps. Now this, Brad whispered, running his hand along the silk wallpaper. This is my natural habitat. They were ushered into the main boardroom. It was a cavernous space dominated by a 20-foot table made of reclaimed black walnut. The view of Manhattan was breathtaking. Brad walked in like he owned the place immediately, throwing his briefcase onto the polished table. Vanessa stood up. Mr. Davis, good to see you again. Brad walked over and shook her hand, holding it a second too long. Vanessa, you look radiant. I see you got my message about the timeline. I am ready to hit the ground running. And this must be Keisha, Vanessa said, looking at the woman chewing gum by the door. Hi, Keisha, said, waving. Nice office. A little stuffy, but we can redecorate. Please take a seat, Vanessa said, gesturing to the chair opposite her. The chairwoman is running a few minutes late, but she asked us to start with your presentation. You mentioned you had some specific ideas for the operations division. Brad sat down, unbuttoning his jacket. He looked confident. He looked arrogant. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a sleek, leather-bound notebook. My heart skipped a beat. I recognized that notebook. It was mine. It was an old moleskin I had used 3 years ago to sketch out ideas for a sustainable housing initiative called Project Phoenix. I had filled it with calculations, architectural drafts, and financial models. I thought I had lost it during our move to Queens. Brad opened the notebook, smoothing the pages. Yes, Brad said, adopting a serious executive tone. I call this the Green City Initiative. It is something I have been working on for years. You see, the problem with Sterling Holdings is that you are too focused on traditional luxury. You are ignoring the eco-conscious market. He turned the notebook around to show them a page. It was my handwriting, my diagrams. This model here, Brad pointed to a complex structural equation I had spent weeks perfecting. This shows how we can reduce overhead by 40% using geothermal integration. I did the math myself in my garage. It is proprietary. Vanessa leaned forward, her eyes narrowing slightly. That is very impressive, Brad. The calculations look advanced. I did not know you had a background in structural engineering. Brad waved his hand. Oh, I am a self-taught man. I read a lot. While my wife was watching reality TV, I was studying physics and market trends. I have always had a mind for numbers. It is a burden, really, being the smartest person in the room. Keisha chimed in from the corner where she was taking a selfie with the city view. He is a genius, guys. Really, he used to draw these things on napkins at dinner. I always told him, Brad, you are too good for that sales job. You belong in the C-suite. Brad beamed at her. Exactly. And that is why I am here. This notebook represents my life's work. It is my intellectual property, and I am willing to license it to Sterling Holdings. For the right price, of course, in addition to my salary. I stood up in my private office. My blood was boiling, but it was a cold, controlled boil. He was not just stealing my money, he was stealing my mind. He was taking credit for the late nights I had spent working while he was out drinking. He was claiming my brilliance as his own while calling me a TV watching anchor. It is time, I said to Silas, who was standing by the door holding my briefcase. Silas nodded and spoke into his headset. The chairwoman is approaching. I walked out of my office and down the long corridor toward the boardroom. The click of my heels on the marble floor echoed like gunshots. I was wearing a white bespoke suit from Alexander McQueen, tailored to fit me like a second skin. Around my neck hung the sterling diamond, a 20-carat solitaire that had belonged to my grandmother. It caught the light and threw rainbows across the walls. I reached the double doors of the boardroom. 2 security guards bowed and placed their hands on the handles. Wait, I heard Brad saying from inside. Before the chairwoman gets here, I want to be clear about my reporting line. I only answer to the top. I do not want to be bogged down by middle management. I need autonomy. Vanessa's voice floated out calm and icy. I think you will find the chairwoman is very hands-on, Mr. Davis. I nodded to the guards. Open it. The heavy oak doors swung open with a dramatic whooshing sound. The air in the room seemed to change instantly. Brad was mid-sentence pointing at my notebook. I stopped. Keisha froze with her phone in mid-air. Silas stepped in first, his cane tapping rhythmically on the floor. All rise for the chairwoman of the board, Elena Sterling. Brad frowned, looking confused. Elena Sterling? Who is... Then I walked in. I did not look at the floor. I did not hunch my shoulders. I walked with the spine of a woman who carries a dynasty on her back. The white suit glowed in the sun-drenched room. The diamonds blazed. I walked straight to the head of the table. I did not sit. I stood there, placing my hands flat on the polished wood, leaning forward just enough to loom over him. Brad's mouth fell open. His eyes bulged. He looked from me to Vanessa, then back to me. He blinked rapidly, as if trying to clear a hallucination. Elena, he whispered. The name came out as a squeak. Keisha dropped her phone. It hit the floor with a crack, but she did not even flinch. She was staring at my necklace. She recognized the quality. She knew in that instant that her fake bag and her rented dress were rags compared to what I was wearing. What are you doing here? Brad stammered, his voice trembling. Security. Why is she here? This is a private meeting. Vanessa did not move. Mr. Sterling did not move. They sat in respectful silence, their eyes fixed on me. I smiled. It was the smile of a wolf that has finally cornered the rabbit. Hello, Brad, I said. My voice was smooth, rich, and dripping with authority. Please do not stop on my account. You were just explaining how you invented the geothermal integration model in your garage. Brad pushed his chair back, the legs screeching against the floor. He looked terrified. No, he said. No, no, no. You are the librarian. You are the coat check girl. You are broke. I saw your bank account. You saw the account I let you see. I corrected him. You saw the allowance I gave myself to make you feel like a man. But you never looked deeper, did you, Brad? You never asked where the money for the down payment came from. You never asked who paid off your student loans 5 years ago. You just took it. I reached out and picked up the notebook from the table. I ran my hand over the cover, and now I continued, my voice hardening. You are sitting in my boardroom presenting my ideas, claiming them as your life's work. I flipped the notebook open to the back page. I turned it around and shoved it toward his face. Read the bottom of the page. Brad, what does it say? Brad stared at the page. His hands were shaking so hard he could barely focus. It says, "Property of—" "Read it louder," I commanded. "Property of Elena Sterling," he whispered. "Dated 2020. I closed the notebook with a snap that sounded like a gunshot in the quiet room. "Exactly. You are not a genius, Brad. You are a thief, and a clumsy one at that." Keisha stood up, her face pale. I did not know. Brad told me he wrote it. I am just a guest here. I should go." "Sit down, Keisha," I barked. The command was so sharp she collapsed back into her chair as if her strings had been cut. "Nobody leaves until I say so," I said, walking slowly around the table toward them. "You came here today expecting a coronation," I said, stopping right behind Brad's chair. I could smell his sweat. It smelled of fear and cheap cologne. "You thought you were going to walk out of here with a salary that would solve all the problems you created. You thought you were trading up." I leaned down, whispering into his ear. "But you forgot the first rule of business, husband. Know who you are dealing with. You thought I was a liability. You did not know I was the bank." I walked back to the head of the table and finally sat down in the massive leather chair. It creaked softly as I settled in. Silas immediately placed a crystal glass of water in front of me. "Now," I said, crossing my legs and looking at them with bored amusement, "let us discuss your interview. Or rather, let us discuss why I am not going to have you arrested for corporate espionage right this second." Brad looked at me, tears welling up in his eyes. He looked small. He looked like the child he really was. "Elena, please," he choked out. "I am sorry. I did not know. We can fix this. I am still your husband. We can share this. We can be a power couple, just like you wanted." I laughed. A genuine, hearty laugh that echoed off the glass walls. "A power couple," I repeated. "Brad, you are not power. You are a parasite, and I just called the exterminator." I looked at Vanessa. "Show him the real offer letter, Vanessa." Vanessa slid a single sheet of paper across the table. Brad picked it up with trembling fingers. It was not a job offer. It was a termination of interview notice accompanied by a cease and desist order regarding the stolen notebook and a bill. A bill for the forensic accounting audit I had run on his previous employment. "You owe my company $40,000 for the time you just wasted," I said. "And that is separate from the rent you owe me personally." Brad dropped the paper. He put his head in his hands. "This is the showdown, Brad," I said softly. "And you brought a knife to a nuclear war." Keisha began to sob. "I want to go home. Please, I just want to go home." I looked at her cold. "You do not have a home, Keisha. Remember, you got evicted this morning. By me." The room fell into a heavy, suffocating silence. The only sound was the hum of the air conditioning and the soft, rhythmic tapping of Silas's cane. They were trapped. They were exposed. And I was just getting started. Brad blinked rapidly, his brain seemingly unable to process the image of me standing at the head of the table. The silence in the room was thick, heavy with the scent of fresh orchids and expensive leather, but Brad decided to break it with the only tool he had left, his monumental arrogance. He let out a nervous, incredulous chuckle, shaking his head as if shaking off a bad dream. "Oh, I get it," Brad said, his voice regaining a sliver of its usual condescension. "You almost had me there, Elena. Nice suit. Did you rent it, or did you get a job here? Is that it?" He looked around at Vanessa and the HR director, forcing a smile. "She must be the new catering staff, right? Or maybe an intern. That explains why she is in the room." He turned back to me, his eyes narrowing. "Elena, seriously, what are you doing here? Are you bringing coffee for the boss? Because if you are, mine is black 2 sugars. And hurry up, we are in the middle of a billion-dollar strategy meeting. You really shouldn't be interrupting the adults talking." Keisha let out a relieved breath, clutching her fake purse. "Oh, thank God. That makes sense. I thought—" "Never mind. Yeah, Elena, get me a latte, oat milk, and make it extra hot." I stood there looking at them. The sheer density of their delusion was almost impressive. They were standing on the edge of a cliff, and they thought they were at a picnic. I did not move toward the coffee station. I moved toward the chair. The massive high-backed leather chair at the head of the table that Brad had been eyeing covetously just minutes before. I walked past him close enough that the silk of my suit brushed against his cheap polyester blend. I reached the chair, placed my hand on the armrest, and sat down. I did not sit like a servant. I sat like a queen, taking her throne. I crossed my legs, adjusted the cuffs of my blazer, and rested my hands on the polished mahogany. "No, Brad," I said, my voice dropping to a register that vibrated with absolute command. "I am not here to bring coffee. I am here to review the termination list, and you are at the very top of it." Brad's smile faltered, then vanished completely. He watched me settle into the seat of power, his eyes darting to Vanessa, waiting for her to reprimand me, waiting for security to drag me out. "Vanessa," he stammered, "are you going to let her do this? She is sitting in the chairwoman's seat. That is disrespectful. Tell her to get up." Vanessa leaned back, crossing her arms. "Mr. Davis, I believe the chairwoman has already introduced herself. You just asked her to fetch you coffee. I would suggest you listen very carefully to what she has to say next." Brad looked at me. Really looked at me for the first time in years. He saw the diamond necklace. He saw the way the light hit the sterling crest on my ring. He saw the cold, hard steel in my eyes. You are the chairwoman," he whispered, the blood draining from his face until he looked like a wax figure. "But how? You are Elena. You are my wife. You are nobody." "I am Elena Sterling," I corrected him. "And you are right about one thing. I was your wife, which means I know every single one of your secrets." I reached for the notebook that was still lying on the table, the notebook he had proudly presented as his own work. I slid it toward me, opening it with a deliberate, slow movement. "You presented this as your intellectual property," I said, tracing the lines of the architectural drawing. "The Green City Initiative. A very ambitious project. The calculations are indeed advanced." Brad nodded frantically, trying to salvage a shred of dignity. Yes, exactly. I did the work. It is my concept. Even if you are who you say you are, that is my mind on those pages. You cannot take that away from me." I smiled. It was a terrifyingly gentle smile. "You really never paid attention to anything I did you, Brad? You saw me writing in this notebook for months. You saw me staying up late. You thought I was meal planning. You thought I was journaling about my feelings. You never once looked at the content." I flipped to the very last page of the notebook. I turned it around and pushed it toward him. "Read it, Brad." He leaned in, his eyes squinting. There, in bold ink dated 3 years ago, was my signature, and below it a notarized stamp. It says, I read aloud for him, "Property of Elena Sterling. All rights reserved. Sterling Holdings Strategic Development Archives." I closed the book. "You stole ideas from my notebook, Brad. But you forgot to read the last page. You tried to sell my own company back to me using my own research. That is not just plagiarism, Brad. That is fraud. And since you presented this in a formal interview with the intent to secure a salary, it is attempted grand larceny." Brad collapsed into his chair. His legs could no longer support him. He looked like a puppet whose strings had been cut. I did not know," he wheezed. "I just found it. I thought it was just doodles." "You thought a structural engineering schematic was a doodle?" I asked. "That just proves you are not qualified to be an intern here, let alone a director." Keisha started to cry softly in the corner. "Brad, you said you were a genius. You said you wrote it." "Shut up, Keisha." Brad snapped, sweat pouring down his forehead. I held up a hand. Silence. "I am not done," I said. "We are just getting to the good part." I signaled to Silas. He stepped forward and placed 3 files on the table in front of Brad. "File number 1, I said, tapping the first folder. "The apartment." Brad looked at the folder. "The eviction notice. You were so angry this morning," I said. "Screaming about the new landlord, screaming about the rent increase. You said you wanted to buy the building just to burn it down." I leaned forward. "I am the landlord, Brad. Sterling Real Estate Trust is a wholly owned subsidiary of my personal portfolio. I bought your building yesterday morning. I sent that notice. And I am the one who rejected your application to buy the unit because, frankly, your credit score is embarrassing." Brad's jaw dropped. You kicked us out. I evicted a non-paying tenant who was destroying the property value with his loud parties and cheap decor. I corrected, and who, might I add, had moved his mistress into the master bedroom. I tapped the second folder. File number 2, the hospital. Brad flinched as if I had hit him. You left me there, Brad. You walked out. You told them you were going to get a loan, but you went to the bank to withdraw the last of my savings to buy a watch. I know because I have the transaction record right here. I opened the folder, revealing the bank statement. You left your wife bleeding on a gurney because her credit card was declined. You thought I was helpless. You thought I was going to be transferred to a charity ward. I pointed to Silas. This is Silas. He is not just my butler. He is the executor of the Sterling Family Trust. He is the man who walked into that hospital room and paid the bill. He paid it with a black card that draws directly from the Sterling reserves. The charity you thought was helping me. That was me. I was the charity. I have been funding your entire life for 5 years, Brad. Every nice dinner, every vacation, every time you miraculously had enough money to cover rent, that was me transferring funds quietly so you could feel like a man. Brad looked at Silas, then at me. His eyes were wide with horror. You paid for everything. Everything, I confirmed. And you thanked me by leaving me to die. I tapped the third folder. This was the thickest one. And finally, file number 3. Vanessa. Brad looked at Vanessa. She was no longer smiling. Her face was a mask of professional indifference. You thought she liked you, I said. You thought she was flirting. You thought she saw your potential. Brad nodded weakly. We had a connection. Vanessa stood up. She walked over to the table and placed a small recording device in the center. She pressed play. Brad's voice filled the room. It was from the gala. Sterling is too conservative. You need someone who is not afraid to break the rules. I cook the books all the time at my current job. It is easy. You just move the debt to a shell account before the quarterly audit. I can show you how to do it. The recording stopped. Brad turned a sickly shade of green. Vanessa is not just the VP of marketing, I said. She is also the acting head of internal security and corporate compliance. I asked her to get close to you. I asked her to invite you here. I asked her to let you talk. I looked at Brad with disgust. You confessed to financial crimes to an undercover security officer, Brad. You thought you were seducing her. In reality, you were giving a deposition. Vanessa looked down at him. Mr. Davis, everything you said last night and this morning has been recorded. You admitted to embezzling funds from the Miller Agency. You admitted to fraud. You admitted to falsifying your resume. Brad looked around the room like a trapped animal. This is entrapment, he yelled, his voice cracking. You tricked me. I caught a thief, I said calmly. There is a difference. I stood up. The movement was sudden and Brad flinched. You called me a zero, Brad. You told me I was a dead weight. You told me I was nothing without you. I walked around the table until I was standing right in front of him. I towered over him in his chair. Look at me, I whispered. He looked up, tears streaming down his face. I am the Sterling heiress. I own this city. I own the roof over your head. I own the debt in your pocket. And I own the evidence that is going to put you in prison for a very long time. I turned to Keisha. And you wanted the lifestyle. You wanted the Sterling name. Well, you got the attention of the Sterling family. I hope it was worth it. Keisha was shaking so hard her teeth were chattering. I didn't do anything. I just wanted a purse. I looked back at Brad. You asked if I was bringing coffee. I said, my voice cold as ice. I picked up the glass of water Silas had given me. I poured it slowly, deliberately onto the floor, right next to Brad's expensive Italian leather shoes. Clean it up, I said. Brad stared at the puddle. He stared at me. Then he broke. Elena, please, he wailed, dropping to his knees. I am sorry, I love you. I was stupid. Don't do this. Do not send me to jail. I will do anything. I will be your servant. I will clean the floor. He reached for a napkin, frantically wiping at the water, sobbing like a child. It was pathetic. It was grotesque. And it was exactly what he deserved. I looked at Silas. Get them out of my sight and call the police. They can pick him up on the sidewalk. I do not want him arrested in the building. It looks bad for the shareholders. Silas nodded. "Yes, madam." He signaled to the security guards. They stepped forward, grabbing Brad by the arms. He screamed, dragging his feet, begging, pleading. Keisha scrambled after him, wailing about her reputation. I watched them being dragged out of the beautiful mahogany doors. The silence returned to the room. I sat back down in my chair. I looked at the view of the city. Vanessa sat back down. "That was efficient, madam," she said. I picked up my pen. "It was necessary," I said. "Now let us get back to business. We have a company to run, and I believe we have a vacancy for a senior director position. Let us find someone who actually reads the notebook." The silence in the boardroom was shattered by the heavy rhythmic thud of boots hitting the marble floor. The double doors swung open again, and this time it was not a waiter or an executive. It was a squad of uniformed officers from the Financial Crimes Division. They did not look like they were here for a chat. Vanessa stood up and pointed a manicured finger directly at the man sobbing on the floor. "That is him, Bradley Davis." The officers moved with terrifying efficiency. Two of them hauled Brad to his feet. He was dead weight. His legs were jelly. He looked around wildly as the cold steel of handcuffs clicked around his wrists. The sound was final. It was the sound of a life ending. "You are under arrest for wire fraud, embezzlement, and forgery of corporate documents." The officer recited the charges with a bored tone that made it sting even more. Brad started screaming. It was a high-pitched, desperate sound. "Elena, tell them. Elena, tell. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. I am your husband. You cannot let them take me." I looked at him over the rim of my glass. I did not feel pity. I felt like a gardener who had finally pulled a weed. "You are right, Brad. You are my husband, which is why I am not pressing charges for the theft of my personal funds. I am letting the state handle you for the millions you stole from your previous employer. Good luck with the public defender." While Brad was being read his rights, Keisha saw an opening. She thought everyone was distracted. She began to inch toward the door, clutching her broken purse to her chest. She moved quietly, trying to blend into the wallpaper. She almost made it to the exit, but Marcus, the head of security, stepped in front of her. He was 6 feet 4 inches of muscle, and he looked down at her with absolute disdain. "Going somewhere, miss," Keisha stammered. "I'm just leaving. I do not know him. I was just a guest. I have to go." Marcus held out a hand. "Not with that bag. Open it, please." Keisha froze. "That is illegal. You cannot search me." Marcus did not blink. "We have you on camera putting the Baccarat crystal ashtray into your bag 3 minutes ago. That ashtray costs $4,000. Open the bag, or we add grand larceny to the police report." Keisha's shoulders slumped. She unzipped the bag. There, nestled among the cheap lip gloss and the crumpled tissues, was the heavy crystal ashtray she had swiped from the table. She had tried to steal a souvenir from her own destruction. The police officer nearest to her shook his head and reached for his second pair of handcuffs. "You are coming too." They were dragged out together, the power couple, the future directors. Brad was weeping openly, his nose running, his expensive suit rumpled and stained. Keisha was screaming that it was a mistake, that she was a victim. Their voices faded down the hallway, replaced by the whispers of the employees who had gathered to watch the show. I sat alone in the boardroom. The silence returned. It was clean. It was pure. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of victory. They were gone. The parasites had been removed. The collapse was total. And I was the last woman standing. 6 months have passed since the doors of the Sterling boardroom closed on my husband's screams. 6 months is a long time in the world of business, but it feels like a lifetime in the world of the heart. I am standing at the podium of the Grand Ballroom at the Pierre Hotel, the very same room where I once stood holding Brad's coat while he flirted with my employee. The room is filled with the same people, the titans of industry, the real estate moguls, the power players of New York. But the atmosphere is different today. No one is looking past me. No one is handing me their drink to hold. The room is silent, the kind of respectful silence reserved for those who hold the keys to the kingdom. I adjust the microphone. The diamond on my finger catches the stage light, sending a prism of color across the front row. I look down at Vanessa, who is sitting there with a proud smile, holding a tablet ready to record the speech. I begin to speak. My voice is steady, amplified by the speakers reaching every corner of the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming. Today, Sterling Holdings is proud to announce the launch of the Isabella Initiative. Named after my mother, who was disowned for choosing love over money, this foundation has a singular mission. We are establishing a $50 million legal defense and medical fund for women who have been financially abused and abandoned by their partners. Thunderous applause erupts. It is not polite applause. It is genuine. I continue. We will pay the hospital bills for women whose husbands vanished when the credit card was declined. We will hire the sharks to defend the women who were told they were worthless. We are turning victims into victors. As I speak, I feel a profound sense of healing. Every check I sign for this foundation feels like I am going back in time to that hospital room and saving myself. I am using the sterling fortune not to build taller towers, but to build stronger women. The press loves it. The stock price has risen 15% since I took over. It turns out that having a soul is actually good for business. But while I am basking in the flashbulbs of the paparazzi, Bradley Davis is existing in a world devoid of light. The Rikers Island detention facility does not have room service. Silas gives me the weekly briefing every Friday morning over breakfast. It is my favorite part of the week. Brad pled guilty to avoid a 10-year sentence. He is currently serving 4 years for wire fraud and embezzlement. Silas tells me that Brad shares a cell the size of my walk-in closet with a man named Big Mike, who does not care about Brad's theories on geothermal integration. Every Tuesday at exactly 2 o'clock, the private line in my office rings. It is a collect call from the correctional facility. The first time it rang, I stared at the phone. I remembered the 17 times I called him from the hospital while I was bleeding. I remembered how his phone went straight to voicemail because he was too busy buying a watch. I let it ring. I never answered. Silas tells me that Brad writes letters, hundreds of them. He spends his commissary money on stamps instead of ramen noodles. He writes that he has changed. He writes that he has found God. He writes that he forgives me for destroying him, which is the ultimate irony. He still thinks he is the victim. He begs for a visit. He begs for bail money. He does not seem to understand that the bail money is in the trust fund he tried to steal, and the visitor list is controlled by the woman he called a zero. He is rotting in a cage of his own making, and the only person listening to his stories is the concrete wall. And then there is Keisha. The internet is a cruel judge, and it handed down a life sentence. The security footage of her trying to steal the crystal ashtray was leaked. I did not leak it, but I certainly did not stop it from spreading. It went viral within hours. It was viewed 4 million times. The memes were relentless. They called her the crystal thief. Internet sleuths did what they do best. They dug into her past. They exposed every fake bag, every rental car she claimed was hers, and every lie she told about her imaginary wealth. She became a laughingstock. She had to delete her Instagram, her TikTok, and her LinkedIn. She went dark. But everyone has to eat. Yesterday, Silas showed me a photo taken by a private investigator. Keisha is working at a discount supermarket in the Bronx. She is not a manager. She is a cashier. In the photo, she is wearing a green polyester smock that is unflattering and stained. She looks tired. Her hair is unkempt, the expensive extensions long gone. She was captured in the middle of an argument with a customer who was yelling at her because a coupon for 50 cents off canned corn had expired. Keisha looked defeated. She looked small. The woman who mocked me for clipping coupons is now scanning them for minimum wage. She is finally learning the value of $1. She is finally understanding that you cannot counterfeit class. She wanted the sterling attention, and she got it. She is famous now, just not in the way she wanted. I walk out to the terrace of the penthouse as the sun begins to dip below the horizon, painting the New York skyline in bruised purples and fiery oranges. The wind up here is strong, but I do not shiver. I am wearing a cashmere coat that costs more than Brad's entire fraudulent career. I hold a glass of vintage Pinot Noir, the liquid dark and rich, swirling in the crystal. I lean against the railing, looking down at the millions of lights flickering in the grid of the city. Down there, somewhere in the shadows, are the ghosts of the people who tried to break me. They threw me away when I was at my weakest. They looked at a woman recovering from surgery, a woman grieving her lost child, and they saw an opportunity to profit. They thought I was trash because I did not sparkle. They did not know that the most valuable things on earth are often hidden in plain sight. They did not know that diamonds are formed under crushing pressure. Brad and Keisha applied the pressure. They squeezed, and they crushed, and they suffocated me. And in doing so, they turned the coal of my grief into the diamond of my resolve. They taught me a lesson that no business school could ever teach. They taught me that money is a magnifier. It does not change who you are, it simply reveals it. For Brad, money revealed a greedy, insecure child. For me, money revealed a warrior. I look at my reflection in the glass door. I do not see the sad librarian anymore. I see Isabella Sterling's daughter. I see a woman who walked through hell and came out owning the place. I take a sip of the wine. It tastes like victory. It tastes like freedom. I am no longer waiting for someone to save me. I saved myself. And in the process, I destroyed the monsters who thought they could eat me alive. Now I have a question for you. I want you to look deep into your own heart. If you were me standing on this balcony with the world at your feet and the phone rang, would you answer it? If Brad begged for forgiveness, if he cried and said he was sorry, would you sign the check to bail him out? Do you believe that everyone deserves a second chance, even the man who left you to die? Or do you believe that some sins are unforgivable and that revenge is a dish best served cold? Would you leave him in that cell to rot? Tell me what you would do in the comments below. I read every single one. And if this story of a quiet wife taking down a loud husband gave you a sense of satisfaction, smash that like button and subscribe to the channel. There are many more secrets in the Sterling family archives, and I am just getting started.